On the night of our wedding, my father-in-law locked the door, handed me a stack of thousands of dollars, and said, "Change your clothes and go out the back. Quickly." I obeyed without hesitation, unaware that I had just escaped a great catastrophe. This was the night of my wedding, which should have been a sweet and peaceful beginning to our married life. However, the laughter and cheers of our friends had barely faded. Once the last guest had left our bridal suite, which smelled of roses and champagne, I heard the harsh click of the deadbolt. I turned in surprise. It wasn't my husband, but my father-in-law, Alexander Vance, who stood there with tension etched on his face. Far from his usual calm demeanor, he held a thick bundle of cash. $50,000. He slammed it onto the table. "Get change right now and go out the back. Fast." I froze, unable to understand what was happening. A tornado of confused thoughts flooded my mind. What kind of scheme was this? Why was he giving me money? Why was he making me flee on the very night of my wedding? When I saw the look in Alexander's eyes, a mixture of suffering and ferocity, I felt my chest pounding as if it wanted to burst. Trembling, I asked, "Dad, what are you saying? Why do I need to leave? And what about Michael, my husband?" Alexander clenched his jaw and lowered his voice, but his tone was urgent. "There is no time to explain. Do what I say, or you won't have another chance." His words were like daggers of ice in my mind. A shiver crawled through my body, but my gut screamed that I had to trust him. With shaking hands, I replaced my white wedding gown with the simple clothes he handed me. My fingers were so numb I could barely fasten the buttons. "Hurry, child. Don't take too long," he urged. I was heading toward the back door when I heard a loud noise at the main gate, followed by a commotion of voices and raucous laughter. My heart stopped beating, and I looked at my father-in-law. His brow furrowed. He signaled for me to be quiet and slowly opened the old wooden door leading to the backyard. A gust of cold night air, smelling of damp earth and dry leaves, rushed in. He placed a small bag in my hand. "Here are your documents and some essentials. Go straight to the end of the road. Someone is waiting for you there. And remember, whatever happens, don't look back." I wanted to ask more, but a lump blocked my throat. When I saw Alexander's face at that moment, I knew this was no joke. His face was lined with worry, and his eyes hid a secret I couldn't comprehend. I started walking with trembling legs that felt as heavy as lead. Behind me, the lock clicked again. The chapter of the life I had just started was abruptly closed. On the night of my wedding, instead of being in my husband's arms, I was secretly leaving our family estate through the back like a fugitive. At the end of the road, I saw a middle-aged man leaning against a motorcycle. The dim light of the street lamp illuminated his face. When he saw me, he nodded slightly. "You're Sophia, aren't you? Get on, fast." I froze. Who was this man? How did he know my name? Thousands of questions crowded my mind. But in that moment, I had no choice but to comply. Behind me, darkness loomed. Ahead, only one possible path. The motorcycle roared to life and vanished into the night. I gripped the small bag tightly, my heart constricting with confusion and fear. I asked myself, where's my husband? What secret is my father-in-law hiding? What terrible fate awaits me if I don't obey Alexander? I looked back and saw the lights of the house growing smaller and smaller. My heart ached. My life had suddenly veered in an unexpected direction. The motorcycle sped through the darkness. The country road was a black and lonely ribbon where the only sound was the whistling wind and the low hum of the engine. I sat on the back, my palms sweating, clinging to the small bag my father-in-law gave me as if it were the only life vest in a raging sea. The yellow lights of the street lamps passed quickly over the stranger's face. He said nothing more except to hold on tight, which only intensified my anxiety. All I was aware of was my own rapid breathing and the frantic beating of my heart. In my mind, the image of my husband, Michael, appeared. At this hour, he should be holding my hand and whispering sweet words, but everything had vanished, replaced by the bizarre scene of my father-in-law giving me thousands of dollars and making me escape out the back like a criminal. I couldn't imagine the reason, but fear grew in my chest like a giant shadow enveloping my life. The man turned onto a dirt road, winding between cornfields. In the distance, the lights of a few farmhouses flickered. He stopped in front of a small, simple cabin with walls made of old timber and a tin roof. "Go inside. They're waiting for you," he said briefly. I got off the bike, my legs shaking and my heart beating like a war drum. The wooden door creaked open, and a middle-aged woman stepped out. She wore a simple brown dress, her hair tied in a bun, and her face bore the marks of experience. When she saw me, she nodded slightly and motioned for me to enter. "You're Sophia, right? Don't be afraid. Come in." I entered with hesitation, trying to suppress my distrust. The interior was simple but tidy. An old wooden table, a few wicker chairs, and a small cot in a corner. The man who brought me entered as well and closed the door. The woman gave me a glass of lukewarm water and said in a low voice, "You will stay here for the night. Tomorrow morning, someone will pick you up to take you to another place. Get some rest." I was stunned. My lips moved, but no sound came out. What was happening? Why did I need to hide? Why was my father-in-law involved in something so strange? I gathered all my courage and asked, "Ma'am, please, tell me what is happening. Where is my husband? Why did my father-in-law make me escape?" The woman stared at me for a long time. In her eyes, there was a shadow of sadness but also resilience. "You don't need to know yet. Too much knowledge will only put you in greater danger. Trust your father-in-law. He did it to save you." I froze. Save me? Did that mean I was in real danger? Every word she spoke added fuel to the fire of my confusion. I clasped my hands together as tears welled up. All my dreams of a quiet married life were destroyed, replaced by a thick fog of uncertainty. The man placed a hand on my shoulder. "Don't be afraid," he said in a low voice. "Alexander is a man of honor. He would never do anything without a good reason. Our responsibility is to keep you safe. Stay here tonight. Lock the door tight. Tomorrow, everything will be clearer." After saying this, he and the woman left, leaving me alone. The room was enveloped in a deafening silence, broken only by the chirping of crickets in the fields. I sat there, bewildered, staring at the glass of water with no desire to drink. My mind was a mess. What was so bad that I needed to flee on the very night of my wedding? Was my husband involved, or was someone looking for me? That night, I couldn't sleep. Every gust of wind, every noise outside made my chest pound. I hugged my small bag on that strange cot while tears streamed down my cheeks. But as the hours passed, one thing became clearer. My father-in-law was protecting me. He wasn't hurting me. On the contrary, he was saving me from a danger I couldn't even imagine. It was almost morning when sunlight peeked through the window. I had slept slightly, but I had barely closed my eyes when there was a loud knock at the door. The man from last night entered. "Sophia, get ready. We need to leave right now." I got up quickly, put on my shoes, and a bad feeling wrapped around me, as if someone were chasing us. The woman gave me a bag with a sandwich and a bottle of water for the journey. She said, "Take care." I walked out into the yard, bathed in sunlight. The motorcycle was waiting. As I climbed on, I looked back at the small house and felt a strange gratitude, even though I didn't know who they were or why they were helping me. The motorcycle roared to life again. This time, we passed through a state highway. There was little traffic. The sky was bright, but my heart was heavy as a stone. I asked in a weak voice, "Who are you? What is really happening? I can't keep running without knowing the reason." The man fell silent for a moment and then answered, "There are things that cannot be said yet, but believe me, if you hadn't left last night, you probably wouldn't be here today. The enemy is close. Alexander chose the only way to save your life." I froze at the coldness creeping through my body. Enemy? I had no enemies. I was just an ordinary woman who had just gotten married. Why was I in such great danger that my father-in-law had to do this? The motorcycle continued to speed forward, leaving many questions unanswered. I tightened my grip on the bag, silently praying for my father-in-law's safety and hoping my husband was okay. But at the same time, an invisible fear wrapped around me. Would I ever return to that house? Would I ever live a normal life as a wife? The road ahead was uncertain, and I knew the coming days would be full of trials. The night of my wedding was not the beginning of happiness, but the doorway to a calamity I had to face. The highway was like an endless ribbon, with sunlight hitting the asphalt. Sitting on the back of the motorcycle with a worried heart, I alternated my gaze between the rapidly passing scenery and the small bag I hugged tightly, where my documents, some belongings, and the large amount of money my father-in-law gave me were hidden. Every time I remembered Alexander's anxious look last night, my throat tightened. The stranger drove with confidence, never looking back. I asked hesitantly, "Sir, I can't keep running like this. I need to know the truth. What is happening?" He glanced at me in the mirror and said in his low voice, "Sophia, Your father-in-law asked me not to tell you anything until the right time. Only one thing I can confirm: if you hadn't left last night, you wouldn't be here right now." His answer was no different from what I had already heard. I bit my lip, holding back tears. The feeling of being trapped in an incomprehensible mystery was suffocating me. I thought of my husband, Michael, and a sharp pain pierced through me. Did he know I was missing? Was he worried about me? Or was he also involved in a terrible thing I didn't know about? After a while, the motorcycle turned onto a smaller road and stopped in front of a wooden house hidden behind a row of oak trees. The man killed the engine and turned to me. "You will stay here for a few days. Don't worry. This place is safe." I got off, still trembling. The house was simple, smelling of fresh wood, far from the appearance of the place where I spent the night. He opened the door and let me in. Inside, another older woman was waiting. She looked at me with compassion and said in a soft voice, "Sophia, child, don't worry. Consider this your home. If anyone asks, say you are a distant niece visiting. Don't say who you really are." I looked at her, trying to find peace in her eyes. "Ma'am, please, tell me the truth. Why did I have to flee on my wedding night? I can't take the uncertainty anymore." The man observed me for a moment and then sighed. "Sophia, we don't want to hide this from you. But this matter is complicated, and lives are at stake. Telling you too early will only put you in greater danger. Alexander knows everything. When he entrusted you to us, he accepted facing this alone." My heart constricted. So my father-in-law was carrying a heavy burden. Since I arrived in the family, I saw Alexander as a man of few words, calm, maintaining order in the house. I never thought he would be the one to save me from a disaster. I wanted to go back, to face the truth, but my mind screamed that if I went back now, I might lose everything. That night, I sat by the small window of the wooden house, watching the moon shine over the field. The wind whispered between the eaves, and the leaves of the trees seemed to hold secrets. I covered my face and cried, filled with longing for my husband and parents. All I wanted was to be a normal wife, to live peacefully in my home, not fleeing like a criminal. But fate had brought me into this tornado, and I had no choice. The next day, the woman brought me a plate of hot food, sat beside me, and said with tenderness, "Sophia, maybe you don't understand now, but everything has a reason. Your father-in-law loves you. Otherwise, he wouldn't dare do something like this." I was touched by her words. I felt a mixture of gratitude and sadness. I never thought the bond between a daughter-in-law and a father-in-law could be this deep. Maybe Alexander saw the danger long ago, just waiting for the right moment to get me away. At noon, a phone rang. The man went out to answer it, and his expression changed. I held my breath. I could only hear a few broken words. They raided Alexander's house. They took him. I felt my heart stop beating, and the blood ran cold in my veins. I ran and grabbed him by the arm. "Tell me, what happened to my father-in-law?" He avoided my gaze and answered briefly. "Alexander is okay, but the situation is very intense. We can't tell you everything yet. Stay calm, and don't let anyone discover this place." I slumped down, trembling from head to toe. Things were worse than I thought. Someone in unknown force was threatening my family, and my father-in-law faced it while I was forced to flee like a stray bird. Night fell. I tossed and turned in bed again. I remembered the eyes of my husband, Michael. Did he know his father saved his wife? Or would he think I ran away on the night of our wedding? That thought crushed my soul. If he misinterpreted it, our union would be ruined. But if he knew the truth, would he have the courage to side with me and his father? Outside, the dogs barked in succession. The man immediately went out to check. I peeked through a crack in the door and saw him tense, holding a baseball bat. About 10 minutes later, he returned and said in a low voice, "It was nothing. Maybe just someone passing by. But Sophia, from now on, be very careful. Don't go out alone." I nodded while tears welled up. Every word he said confirmed that there was a real and terrifying threat out there. I, a newlywed, was now a witness to a secret so big I couldn't even understand it. On the third night, I had a strange dream. I saw my father-in-law standing in the middle of the darkness. He was looking at me with longing and whispering, "You need to live. Whatever happens, you need to live." I woke up abruptly with a loud pounding in my chest. The dream felt like a message, a push to follow this path. No matter how uncertain it was, a new determination was born in me. I could no longer wait in the dark. I needed to discover the truth, find out who was threatening my family, and what I could do to protect my love and dignity. The wedding night was just the beginning of a turbulent journey, but I was confident that eventually, the light would shine. And the next day, an unexpected event broke the fragile peace I had barely achieved. That morning, the sky was gray, and the wind blew hard around the wooden house. I woke up with a feeling of anxiety, like a tremor in my soul. The dream about my father-in-law continued to trouble me. The man and woman sheltering me were awake and preparing breakfast. They avoided my gaze and exchanged only short sentences, creating a heavy atmosphere that intensified my anxiety. We were sitting at the table when suddenly we heard the roar of a motorcycle on the road, followed by several dry and urgent knocks at the door. The man, whose name was Matthew, stood up with an alert look and signaled for me to hide in the adjacent room. I quickly entered, my heart beating loudly. Through a crack in the door, I heard the conversation outside. "Matthew, did anyone strange pass by here?" asked a deep and suspicious male voice. "No, just me and my wife live here," Matthew answered firmly. No trace of fear in his voice. Heavy bootsteps were heard on the floor, and another voice continued. "We heard that old man Alexander's new bride disappeared on their wedding night. Looks like Alexander has a problem. If you're hiding her, watch out, or you might get dragged into this." Hearing that, a cold shiver crawled through my body. I bit my lip tightly, afraid the slightest noise would reveal me. Matthew maintained his tough tone. "I don't know anything about that. There's no one else here but us. If you want to search, go ahead. But don't break anything." My heart constricted. If they entered, they would discover me any moment. Outside, chaotic footsteps were heard, and the creak of a window being forced open. I held my breath, clinging to the edge of the bed so tightly my hands bled. But strangely, after a few moments, they left not before leaving a threat. "Remember, Matthew, if we find out you're lying, you'll pay the consequences." The noise of the motorcycle faded away, and the house was enveloped in silence again. Matthew entered the room, looked at me, and sighed. "Sophia, you see now, danger is lurking everywhere. They won't give up easily." I slumped to the floor, crying ceaselessly. I never thought my life would become this constant escape. A newlywed who, instead of smiles of happiness, lived in suffering and fear. But deep down, I began to understand that my father-in-law's warnings were not in vain. If I hadn't left that night, there was no doubt I would have fallen into the hands of those cruel people. In the afternoon, I decided to open the small bag my father-in-law gave me. Besides my documents, I found a thick envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter with hurried but clear handwriting. "Sophia, you need to leave here immediately. Don't ask why. Don't look back. Trust me, we are all in danger. If you stay safe, everything will become clear in the end. I trust you are strong enough to get through this. Dad." After I read it, tears flowed. I caressed every word as if it were engraved on my heart. My father-in-law was not only worried about me but also placing his trust in me. The determination in his words made me realize there was a terrible secret I didn't know yet. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat at the wooden table. The flickering light of a gas lamp cast shadows on the wall while my thoughts spun around. My father-in-law dared to save me. But what about him? What was his future? I wanted to go back to find him. But at the same time, I was afraid my return would only be a burden to him. The next day, Matthew looked in a hurry. He said in a low voice, "Sophia, we can't stay any longer. They're suspicious. I'll take you to a farther place, safer." I froze, but I knew he was right. This house, though peaceful, couldn't protect me forever. I arranged my few belongings with a heart divided between anxiety and grief. The woman gave me a piece of warm bread and held my hand. "Child, don't be afraid. All storms pass." I looked at her with tears forming in my eyes. Never in my life had I felt strangers offer their protection in this way. The motorcycle roared again in the morning air. This time, the road was longer and lonelier. Sitting on the back, I leaned my head on Matthew's back with thousands of thoughts. Suddenly, in the distance, two people on a motorcycle blocked us in the middle of the road. Their faces were fierce, their gazes sharp as knives. One of them shouted, "Stop! Who are we looking for?" Matthew tightened his grip on the handlebars and turned to me. "Sophia, hold on tight. I think that's them," he shouted. Suddenly, the motorcycle sped up, charging head-on. The two followed, chasing us. The wind whipped my face. My heart felt like it would explode. All I could do was hug him and pray for a miracle. The road was winding, and the motorcycle swayed violently. The shouts and roar of engines mixed together. I looked back and saw they were close, just meters away. In the moment, it seemed they would overtake us. Matthew suddenly swerved onto a path crossing through a sugarcane field. The leaves whipped us as we passed. The bike wobbled but kept moving forward. After a desperate run, we finally came out onto a deserted, dusty road. The noise of the engines behind us disappeared. I was out of breath, exhausted. Matthew stopped, wiped the sweat away, and said in a still trembling voice, "They know, Sophia. Now we need to go even farther." Hearing that, fear wrapped around me. Who was the enemy? Why were they chasing me like this? A vague suspicion began to form in my mind. This secret didn't just involve my father-in-law, but my husband's whole family and even my own marriage. The sun wasn't high yet. The road was empty. I sat silently with a heavy heart. A newlywed brought into a tornado of danger from the moment I crossed the threshold of my new home. The wedding night turned into a beginning of an escape full of blood and tears. But I trusted my father-in-law's words. "You need to live." And I would live. And I was determined to discover the truth hidden behind all these secrets. And the moment the motorcycle stopped in front of another unknown house on the outskirts of town, I saw a familiar person come out, which stopped me in my tracks. The house on the outskirts appeared in my view when the motorcycle stopped after the long journey. It was a house with red brick and white walls, faded by time. The iron gate was slightly open, revealing a neglected garden. I hadn't yet recovered from the shock when a familiar figure emerged from the yard. His tall and thin frame, his hurried walk, and that anxious look, it was my husband, Michael. My heart constricted, and my whole body trembled. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. For the past few days, I lived in worry, thinking he was at home looking for me, or at least desperate over his wife's disappearance on their wedding night. And now he was here, in the very place Matthew brought me after days of fleeing. Why the coincidence? Michael saw me and was shocked. His eyes widened, showing surprise that quickly turned to awkwardness. I got off the motorcycle and remained motionless. I wanted to ask him 1,000 questions, but a lump was in my throat. Matthew, noticing the situation, showed brief caution, but then stepped away and said, "You two have things to talk about. I'll just circle around to make sure the area is safe." He left us alone in the middle of the yard. The silence lengthened, becoming unbearable. Finally, I broke the silence with a trembling voice. "Michael, why are you here? Did you know how I had to flee? Did you know that night your father sent me out the back to save me from danger?" Michael stepped closer to me, but he couldn't look me in the eyes. He scratched his head and sighed. "Sophia, I'm sorry. I didn't expect things to reach this point either. But you have to believe me, all of this is to protect you." I froze. His words brought me both relief and anxiety. I stared him in the eyes, looking for a trace of honesty. "Protect me? Then tell me, what is happening? Why did I have to flee on my wedding night? Why did your father have to sacrifice so much?" Michael fell silent. His lips moved several times, but no words came out. I clearly saw the inner struggle on his face. Finally, he sat on the veranda steps with a hoarse voice. "Sophia, Dad didn't want you to know right away because he was afraid you'd be too affected. But at this point, I can't hide it from you anymore. Our family is being watched by a group of people. They have an old grudge against us, and you were the target they chose." Hearing that, I felt horror. I took a step back, shaking my head. "But I have nothing to do with it. I'm a newlywed. I haven't hurt anyone." Michael clenched his fists, his voice breaking. "Because you are the new one, the weakest link. They believe attacking you is the easiest way. That night, my father received a warning. If you didn't leave, they likely would have kidnapped you to force our family's hand." My whole body shook. The fear I felt wasn't an illusion. I remembered the deep voice of the man the other day. His words, that the new bride wasn't there on her wedding night. Everything fit together like pieces of a grim puzzle. I sat beside him, crying incessantly. "Michael, why is their hatred so great? What did our family do to suffer this?" Michael was silent for a long time before sighing. "It started many years ago. My father went into business with a partner, and they had a conflict. That man swore revenge, but he never dared to face Dad directly. He always chooses to attack the weakest in the family. This time, he wants to use you to force Dad to surrender." I was stunned. Every word was like a knife in my heart. I never thought that by getting married, I would face such intense hatred stemming from the past. "And Dad? How is he now?" I asked in a trembling voice. Michael looked into the distance, his eyes red. I'm not sure either. All I know is they're pressuring him. But he still managed to save you. He chose to face the danger alone rather than let you fall into their hands. Hearing that, I broke down sobbing. Never had I felt my father-in-law's love so clearly. A tough man, a man of few words. But in the face of trials, he was ready to bear all the danger to protect his daughter-in-law. I felt deep sadness, regret, and at the same time, a strange strength sprouting inside me. No, I can't keep hiding like this. I need to do something to save Dad. Michael, I don't want to stand by while he faces this alone. Michael turned to look at me, a mixture of pain and pride in his eyes. I understand. But for now, the most important thing is your safety. You are the reason my father keeps fighting. If something happens to you, he will collapse completely. I held my husband's hand, my tears mixing with my determination. I knew he was right, but my heart refused to accept it. I couldn't let Alexander bear it all alone. That afternoon when Matthew returned, he and Michael spoke for a long time in a closed room. I remained sitting on the veranda, listening to the whispers and feeling the burning in my heart. Finally, Michael came out and sat beside me. Sophia, he said in a low voice, you need to be ready. We can't go back yet. But as soon as possible, we will find a way to get Dad out of there. I promise. I looked at my husband and saw resilience in his eyes. In an instant, I didn't feel alone anymore. Although a storm awaited us, at least I was with him. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. Those enemies wouldn't give up, and with every passing day, the danger drew closer. That night, I huddled in my husband's arms, but couldn't sleep. Outside, the wind hummed between the trees like a warning. I closed my eyes and told myself, Sophia, you need to be strong no matter what happens. You need to live. Discover the truth and protect the ones you love. And I was completely unaware that that night, shadows were roaming around the house, preparing for a new confrontation. That night, the house on the outskirts was wrapped in a tense silence. The moon hanging above cast a silver and cold light on the garden. I lay in Michael's arms but couldn't sleep. Every time the wind whistled through the window cracks or a dog barked in the distance, my chest pounded. A vague hunch told me our short days of peace were ending. And that was exactly what happened. It was nearing midnight when I was starting to doze off. I heard the sound of strange footsteps outside the gate. They were careful but enough for a woman like me, fleeing for days, to notice. I got up quickly and gently shook my husband. Michael, there's noise outside. He woke up immediately. He listened carefully for a moment and then tightened his grip on my hand. Yes, someone's there. Don't be afraid. Stay here. He stood up and slowly walked toward the door. I put on a robe, my heart pounding, trying to sharpen my hearing. Suddenly, there was a loud knock at the door. Knock. Knock. Not very loud, but full of intent. I held my breath, remembering the scene the other day when those men blocked us on the road. Outside, Matthew's deep voice echoed. Who is it? What do you need at this time of night? A deep and cold male voice answered. Open the door. We just want to ask questions. We heard old man Alexander's new bride might be here. Hearing that, a cold horror crawled through me. I placed a hand on my chest, struggling to breathe. They had arrived here. No matter how far I ran, they were still following me. Michael returned and whispered in my ear, Sophia, go to the back room. Don't come out no matter what happens. Stay there. I will protect you. I bit my lip, holding back tears. I wanted to scream for him not to leave, but something blocked me. He went out into the yard to face them with Matthew. I heard a heated argument. We aren't hiding anyone here. If you want to search the house, you need a warrant, Matthew said firmly. Warrant? At this hour, with your lights on. How do we know if we don't search? One teased. Trembling, hiding behind the door, every word felt like a hammer blow. Suddenly, there was a loud crash at the gate, followed by the noise of a struggle. In fear, I tried to run out, but Matthew's wife held me tight. No, child, she whispered. Going out now will only make the situation worse. Outside, the shouting intensified. I heard Michael yell, if you dare enter, I'll call the police. A mocking laugh was heard. Police? You think the police will help you? Old man, Alexander, can't even protect himself, let alone you. Hearing my father-in-law's name, I felt a pang in my heart. It was true. They were looking for me to pressure him. Anger and fear mixed, making me shake. After a few moments, they didn't seem to dare enter. They left not before leaving threats. but the shadows of several motorcycles circling at the start of the road proved they weren't giving up. The house was enveloped in suffocating tension. Michael returned with a tense face and sweat on his forehead. He hugged me, his voice breaking. "Sophia, did you see? They won't stop. They want you." Dad was right. If you are safe, he has a chance to defend himself. But as time goes on, it becomes more dangerous. I looked at him with tears welling in my eyes. "Michael, I don't want to run like this anymore. I want to know the truth. I want to face this with you. I can't live in this constant fear." He squeezed my shoulders, his eyes red. "I know. But believe me, this is temporary. I need to protect you, Sophia. Dad has already sacrificed too much. I can't let his sacrifice be in vain." I rested my head on his shoulder, full of compassion. I knew they were both fighting with all their might, and I had become a burden. That thought hurt me deeply. The next day, Matthew spoke to us. "We can't stay any longer. They've smelled our trail. We need to find another place, safer. Maybe we need to take Sophia far from here." I listened quietly, my heart constricting. Moving away meant moving away from Michael and my father-in-law. But reason forced me to understand that if I stayed, I would endanger them all. Michael held my hand with an anxious look. "Sophia, if you have to leave, will you be brave enough to go alone?" "I will stay here with Dad." His question was like a dagger in my heart. "Leave alone?" I shook my head in fear while tears flowed. "No, I can't. Where you go, I go. If you stay, I stay." He hugged me tight. We both cried silently. I knew this wasn't just my choice, but a matter of life and death for the whole family. That night, I couldn't sleep again. The distant noise of motorcycles, the barking of dogs, the moan of the wind, everything foretold a bad omen. I got up and looked at Michael, sleeping exhaustedly. A new determination sprouted in me. I couldn't keep running. I needed to find a way to understand the truth, to fight alongside my husband and father-in-law. I opened my small bag, took my father-in-law's letter, and read it over and over. Every word was engraved on my heart. "You need to live whatever happens. You need to live." His words were like a torch lighting my path. I would live, but not just to survive. I would live to reveal the secret and get my family out of this danger. And at that moment, Matthew's phone rang on the veranda. He answered quickly, and in an urgent voice, came in to call Michael. I followed slowly, my heart pounding. From the call, I only heard a few broken words. "Alexander. They took him to another place." I felt my legs weaken, my vision blur. My father-in-law, the man who saved me, was now in their hands. A real storm was brewing, and I knew this was just the beginning. The bad news crashed down on me like a boulder. I slumped to the floor, clinging to the edge of the bed with trembling hands. My gaze was vacant. My father-in-law, the man who gave me $50,000 and made me flee on our wedding night, was captured. Where did they take him? What did they plan to do to him? Just thinking about it made my chest tight. Michael and Matthew looked at each other, their faces showing deep worry but also firm determination. Michael knelt beside me and held my cold hand. "Sophia, calm down. Dad is still alive. If they took him, it means they don't plan to hurt him immediately. They want to use him to force us to do something." Hearing that, I sobbed, burying my face in my husband's shoulder. His comforting words couldn't erase the fear I felt, but somehow they gave me hope that there was still time. Sobbing, I said, "Michael, I can't remain idle. Dad saved me. I can't leave him in this situation." Matthew placed a hand on my shoulder and said in a deep, hoarse voice, "Sophia is right. But to save him, we need a plan. Rushing in blindly now will only bring us more misery. Those people cannot be trusted. They have many men. If we act rashly, your whole family will be in danger." The atmosphere in the house turned cold. I wiped my tears, trying to regain my composure. A strong determination burned inside me. Whatever happened, I would fight alongside my husband to bring his father back. That night, we sat around the old wooden table. The gas lamp projected dancing shadows on the wall. Michael took out a map and spread it on the table. His voice was slow but steady. "According to our informants, they are hiding in some abandoned warehouses by the river. They took my father there. It's a secluded place, not much traffic, perfect for hiding a captive." I listened with horror crawling through me. A damp and dark place far from any houses. Just thinking about it, I felt the danger. I asked in a trembling voice, "What is your plan?" He looked at me, his eyes shining in the lamplight. "I'll investigate first. If I get a chance, I'll try to contact him. But Sophia, you cannot come. It's too dangerous. I shook my head repeatedly as tears flowed again. No, I can't be left behind. I need to go with you. I can't handle something happening to you or your father while I hide in a safe place. I'd rather die with you than leave my family. He squeezed my hand tight, his face showing deep pain. I understand you, Sophia, but I can't let you be put in danger. You're my father's last hope. If something happens to you, everything collapses. His words silenced me. I remained quiet, hugging my knees with a constricted heart. I knew he was right. But how could I stay calm while the person I loved most was a prisoner? Matthew looked at us and said thoughtfully, "Maybe we should think of a long-term plan. I have an old contact in the police who might help us. But we need to hide Sophia thoroughly first. If they discover her, they will use her as their final trump card." I looked up with pleading eyes. "Mr. Matthew, please, save my father-in-law. He has sacrificed too much for me. I can't leave him." Matthew nodded, his voice firm. "I promise to do everything I can, but you need to take care of yourself. Do you understand?" I nodded while tears continued to flow. The following days passed in constant tension. Michael went out often to look for information. I waited with a pounding heart. Every hour felt like an eternity. Every time he returned with a sunburned face and deep bags under his eyes, my heart ached with pity. One afternoon, he returned with a glint of hope in his eyes. He whispered, "Sophia, I saw Dad. He's thinner, but still strong. He's tied up in a small room in the warehouse with 2 guards. He saw me from afar and shook his head as if telling me not to do anything foolish." I sobbed, imagining my father-in-law tied up with a steady gaze. The pain was like a knife in my chest. I held my husband's hand, trembling. "Michael, at least he's alive. We need to hurry. I'm afraid if we wait, they'll hurt him." He hugged me, his voice becoming serious. "I know, but we need to wait for the right opportunity. If we rush, we put him in more danger." That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the flickering flame of the lamp, listening to the rain on the roof with a heavy heart. I remembered the moment on my wedding night when my father-in-law gave me the thousands of dollars and said, "Fast, leave now." His gaze, worried but firm, remained etched in my mind. I promised myself, "Dad, I won't fail you. I will bring your son and you home." The next morning, Matthew received a call from his contact. The police knew about the case, but they needed more concrete evidence to intervene. Hearing that, the tension intensified. Time was not in our favor. Michael squeezed my hand, his eyes shining with determination. "Sophia, don't worry. Even if I have to risk everything, I will save my father." I looked at him with a tight heart, but full of a new faith. I knew from that moment, our family had no retreat. There was only one way: face the situation and fight for our peace. And just as we were discussing the plan, the noise of motorcycles roared on the road again. This time, not just one or two, but a whole group. Headlights cut through the yard, illuminating shadows hidden behind the fence. I froze. I felt my heart stop beating. They had found us, and this time, they wouldn't let us escape. The rumble of engines echoed on the road like thunder, and the headlights cut through the yard of the house. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Never had I felt death so close. The shadows of several men stood behind the fence with threatening gestures, holding baseball bats and crowbars. They were no longer thieves prowling in the night. They openly surrounded us like a pack of wolves stalking their prey. Michael pushed me inside the house with a tense look. "Sophia, stay calm. Whatever happens, don't go out. Stay by my side. Don't separate from me." I nodded repeatedly, clinging to his shirt so tightly my knuckles turned white. In my mind, the image of my father-in-law tied up in that abandoned warehouse appeared. His steady gaze asking me to live, giving me strength to remain standing. Outside, loud bangs echoed on the gate accompanied by shouts. "Open the door. We know old man Alexander's new bride is hiding here. If you don't open it, we'll break it down." Matthew, holding a sturdy wooden bat, answered in a deep but firm voice. "This is my house. If you want to enter, you need a warrant. Don't think you can do whatever you want." A mocking laugh answered him. "Warrant? Here, we're the law here." After that, a loud crash shook the gate, and the metal latch flew off. I screamed in fear, hugging Michael. He held my shoulder, his voice, though serious, calming. "It's nothing, Sophia. I'm here. I will protect you no matter what." In that moment of chaos, I saw his eyes more determined and steady than ever. I remembered his father's eyes the night he helped me escape. Two men, father and son, carrying the weight of my life. The sound of shattering would announce they had broken the gate. The shadows entered the yard, sweeping the area with their flashlights. The light hit my face, blinding me. "There she is," they shouted. "She's the wife of old man Alexander." In fear, I tried to retreat, but Michael blocked them. "Who gave you permission to touch my wife?" he shouted. The men laughed. One of them, tall and bulky, stepped forward. "Don't kid yourself, Michael. Your father is in our hands. We just need to bring this woman for old man Alexander to follow." His words were like a dagger in my heart. I trembled, but suddenly an idea entered my mind. If I let them catch me, maybe my father-in-law would be saved. But if I fought, he would suffer more. The thought silenced me. Michael, seemingly reading my mind, turned to me. "Sophia, don't even think about it," he said in a broken but firm voice. "Dad would rather die than see you in their hands. You need to live. Remember." His words echoed in my head like thunder, wiping away any foolish idea. I squeezed his hand, nodding as tears streamed down my cheeks. Matthew, brandishing his bat, charged to stop those approaching. "If you want to hurt them, you have to go through my corpse first," he growled. The chaos began. Running footsteps were heard, the clashing of bats, the screams. Michael held my hand and led me into a room. I looked around for an exit and saw a partially open window where moonlight entered. Michael whispered in my ear, "Sophia, if the situation gets bad, you need to escape through there. Don't look back. Trust me." I sobbed, hugging him. "No, I won't leave you. We go together." He pushed me away, his gaze serious but full of love. "Obey me, Sophia. As long as you are safe, I have hope. If I lose you, it's all over." Outside, the shouts were getting closer. A shadow jumped from the main door and charged at us. Michael pushed me behind him and punched the intruder with all his might. The man fell, but two more immediately entered. I screamed in desperation. At that moment, Matthew also entered, fighting to make a path and create a gap. "Sophia, run," he shouted. I froze. Flee? Leave my husband in the hands of those barbarians. My hesitant heart was about to explode. But Michael's gaze, steady as a command, made me understand that if I stayed, all three of us would be caught. I bit my lip hard, turned, and jumped out the window. I ran into the dark with trembling legs. The shouts and crashes behind me chased me, but I didn't dare look back. With every step, tears flowed, and my heart constricted. I ran, repeating to myself, "You need to live, Sophia. Live to save him. To save your father-in-law." The dusty road was cold beneath my bare feet, and the wind hummed in my ears. I didn't know how long I ran. All I knew was when my legs couldn't take another step. I stopped in a deserted and vast area. The moon remained high, its silver light illuminating my exhausted body and broken heart. I sat on the ground and sobbed. In my head, the shouts of those men echoed, the sound of the crashes, and Michael's hoarse voice shouting, "Sophia, run." Everything crowded my mind, about to make me faint. But I remembered my father-in-law's look, his words, "You need to live." I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. Although behind me was only darkness and ahead an uncertain future, I had to keep going. I couldn't give up. I needed to find a way to go back and save them. That night, I wandered through the deserted and lonely fields. Every step felt like walking on a cliff. But deep in my being, I knew the real fight was just beginning. And I, a newlywed, had become the center of a deadly game where I was forced to participate. Somewhere in the dark, dogs barked, and the roar of motorcycles mixed. They hadn't given up yet. I looked at the sky with blank eyes and whispered, "Dad, Michael, I will come back. I swear. I won't let anyone I love be lost." And I continued walking, although ahead of me was an uncertain path. Endless. I dragged my feet in the thick darkness, barefoot on the cold ground, my breath ragged. My body was at its limit. But the idea of giving up didn't even cross my mind. In my head, Michael's desperate voice, shouting "Sophia, run," and my father-in-law's look when he gave me the money echoed, "You need to live." Those words were the fire keeping me from collapsing in the long night. I walked until my legs refused to take another step. Then, in the distance, I saw the flickering light of a lamp in a small shack by the roadside. I approached, staggering, and gently knocked on the dilapidated wooden door. From inside, a hoarse voice asked, Who was wandering at this hour? The door opened, and an old man with white hair and a thin frame emerged. He wore brown, faded clothes, but his eyes shone in the dark. When he saw my pitiful state, his brow furrowed. "What is a young lady like you doing alone out here?" I tried to calm down, and in a trembling voice begged, "Sir, please, let me hide for a moment. Someone is chasing me." The old man observed me for a long time and then nodded, stepping aside to let me in. The shack was small and simple but clean. There was an old wooden table, some mats on the floor, and the flickering lamp. I sat down, trembling from head to toe, my vision blurred by tears. The old man gave me a glass of warm water and said in a low voice, "I know. You're the daughter-in-law of old man Alexander, aren't you?" I froze. I almost dropped the glass. My heart beat loudly in disbelief. "You know my father-in-law?" I asked, trembling. The old man sighed with a distant look. "Of course I know him. Alexander and I were friends in our youth. I warned him several times to stay away from business with those people, but he didn't listen. It's a pity it all ended up like this." I shivered. The man in front of me wasn't a stranger. He was a witness to the past that brought my family into this danger. I rushed to hold his hand with a broken voice. "Sir, please, help my father-in-law. They took him. My husband is also in danger. I don't know what to do." The old man looked at me with sad eyes and nodded. "I heard the news. Alexander is in the warehouses by the river. But don't worry, they won't hurt him immediately. They need him to get something bigger." "What purpose?" I asked with a lump in my throat. The old man lowered his voice and stared at me. "They want to force your family to surrender the lands adjacent to the interstate to them. They're going to build a massive project there, and those lands are worth a fortune. Alexander knows this, but he refuses to sell. So they use this cowardly tactic attacking the newcomer daughter-in-law, the weakest." Hearing that, a cold horror crawled through me. So the whole tragedy revolved around a piece of land. I covered my face, suppressing a sob. My God, just for money, they could drive a whole family to death. The old man nodded with a serious look. "Human greed is scarier than any demon. But child, what matters now isn't mourning but finding a way to get your father-in-law out of there." I looked at him with pleading eyes. "Do you have any ideas?" The old man thought for a moment, and then said, "I have an old friend in the state police who still has influence. But to convince him to intervene, we need clear evidence. Will you be brave enough to go back to the warehouses with me to get it?" Hearing his question, I felt a shiver of fear. Going back to that place was like entering the lion's mouth. But I remembered my father-in-law's steady gaze and Michael's desperate voice. I clenched my fists and nodded with determination. "I will dare, sir. If it's to save my father and husband, I fear nothing." The old man smiled slightly with admiration in his eyes. "Good. You have courage like Alexander did when he was young. But remember, stay calm. One small mistake could cause our deaths." I nodded, feeling a new hope. After days of fleeing and fear, I finally found a way to fight. That night, the old man let me rest in his shack. Lying on the mat, staring at the lamp flame, I was full of anxiety and determination. I knew the road ahead was full of danger, but at least I had found an ally. The next morning, as the rooster crowed in the village, the old man took me behind his garden and showed me a path leading into the fields. He said it was a shortcut to the river where they were hiding my father-in-law. He handed me an old cell phone. "If there is danger, press number 1. My friend will answer, but only use it if absolutely necessary so we aren't detected." I held the phone with red eyes. "Thank you, sir. If not for you, I would have lost all hope." He waved his hand with a distant look. "Helping you is helping my old friend. Be strong, child. In this life, only those who dare to face their destiny can change it." I nodded and took a deep breath, feeling the fresh morning air in my hair. For the first time in days, I didn't feel like a captive fleeing. I was ready to be a warrior and fight for the lives of my loved ones. My feet stepped on the wet path, my heart full of determination. I knew danger awaited me, but this was also the only chance to find my father-in-law and Michael. And at that moment, I promised myself, I will come back, Dad. I won't let you and Michael fall into darkness. But I never imagined that path would not only lead me to the river, but also reveal a bigger secret, a secret about my own identity. The morning mist wrapped like a white veil over the path to the river. I walked with the old man, feet wet from the dew, and a heart divided between anxiety and longing. Every step brought me closer to the guillotine hanging over our heads, But I also felt a glimmer of hope to find a clue to save my father-in-law and Michael. The old man walked slowly but steadily, leaning on a bamboo cane faded by time. His eyes, sharp in the mist, kept checking behind us, ensuring no one followed. I looked at him, feeling a mix of gratitude and suspicion. This old friend of my father-in-law, appearing in my moment of greatest desperation, seemed like a savior, but his gaze always seemed to hide something. We stopped at a small hill overlooking the river. There stood a row of abandoned warehouses with moss-covered walls and roofs with broken tiles. Under the dawn light, the scene was lonely and dark like a scar on the landscape. In front of the door of one of the warehouses, several large men stood guard, armed with knives and bats. I held my breath with a pounding heart. Although I had been told, seeing it with my own eyes made me realize the magnitude of the danger. Approaching there was like entering the lion's mouth. The old man placed a hand on my shoulder and whispered, "Don't worry, child. What matters now is to observe and look for an opportunity. We can't enter by force. We need to be smarter." I nodded, breathing deeply to calm down. But when I focused my gaze, I felt my heart constrict. Through a crack in the warehouse door, I made out the shadow of a man with white hair, sitting slumped over with his hands tied. It was my father-in-law, Alexander. I placed a hand over my mouth to stop a sob, and tears blurred my vision. For days, his image had appeared in my dreams. Now, seeing him chained, I felt as if my heart were being crushed. "Dad," I whispered in a broken voice. He was alive. The old man gently squeezed my hand, signaling me to be quiet. Then he leaned in and whispered in my ear, "I see him. But there is something more important. Do you know why they are chasing you like this?" I shook my head, confused. No time to wipe my tears. The old man stared at me for a long time and then spoke a sentence that silenced me. "Because you aren't just Alexander's daughter-in-law. You are the sole heir to a significant portion of those lands. The lands left to you by your real parents." I froze, trembling from head to toe. What? What are you saying? My real parents. But I'm an orphan. I grew up in poverty. The old man looked me directly in the eyes, his voice firm. "Yes, you grew up in poverty because the truth was hidden. Your real parents owned a vast estate right next to the interstate. After their death in a mysterious accident, you were sent to distant relatives without knowing your true identity. And now, with the new urbanization project, those lands have become a priceless treasure. The enemy doesn't just want Alexander's family lands, but your properties as well." I felt the world crumble on me. My vision blurred, and I almost fell. If the old man hadn't supported me, what he said felt like a storm in my head. They weren't chasing me just because I was the weak daughter-in-law, but because of my own identity, an identity never revealed to me. Had I lived all these years not knowing I carried such a huge weight? "That can't be happening," I whispered in a trembling voice. "If what you say is true, I've lived a lie." The old man nodded with a sad look. "I'm sorry to tell you this at this moment, but you need to know to understand why you are the center of this revenge. You are the key, Sophia. Without you, they cannot complete their annexation plan." I sat on the grass, holding my head. Tears flowed mixed with anger and pain. I remembered my father-in-law's look when he gave me the letter. "You need to live." Did he know my true identity from the beginning and kept silent to protect me? And now, he was suffering because of me. The old man continued in a low voice. "Child, I'm not saying this to break you, but for you to rise. You have the right and responsibility to protect those lands. To protect the family you belong to now. Tonight, I will help you get closer to the warehouse. Be prepared because you might come face to face with the mastermind of this whole operation." I wiped my tears. My eyes were swollen, but shining with a new determination. The old man's words were like a fire burning in my heart. Yes, I could no longer be weak. I could no longer keep running. I carried not only the love of my husband and father-in-law, but also the legacy of my true parents. I needed to live, not just to survive, but to protect, to exact justice. I looked up, my voice trembling but firm. "Sir, please, tell me what I should do. I am ready for anything, even if a storm awaits me." The old man looked at me and nodded slightly with a look of trust. "Good. You have the spirit of someone who doesn't give up. Tonight, I will show you the truth, and from there, you will know what you must do." I took a deep breath and looked at the dark river, where my father-in-law's figure was chained. A fire burned inside me. Even if I had to pay in blood and tears, I would get him out of there. And at the same time, reveal the secret that had wrapped my life for years. That night, on the bank of the cold river, I swore to myself, I will live, Dad. Not just to save my life, but to take back everything stolen from us. That night, the mist was thick, and steam rose from the river like smoke. I wore the dark clothes the old man gave me and covered my hair with a bandana. We walked silently on the narrow dirt path. Grass grew everywhere, and with every step, I heard the rapid beating of my heart. The old man led the way. Though thin, his walk was steady, as if he knew every tree and plant in that place. As we approached the warehouses, we hid behind some thick bushes. The guards' flashlights swept the area, projecting their shadows on the faded walls. The sound of coughing and rude laughter coming from inside made my heart shiver. One small mistake, and both the old man and I could die. I whispered in his ear, "My father-in-law is inside. What are we going to do?" The old man signaled me to be quiet and said in a low voice, "Patience. We need to know what is happening inside first. Tonight, we just observe. We look for a weakness. Haste will ruin everything." I nodded, though burning inside with impatience. The image of my father-in-law slumped in that dark room remained etched in my mind. All I wanted was to break down the door and get him out. But reason reminded me of his words. "You need to live." We moved along the mossy wall to a small crack. From there, the interior of the warehouse was visible, illuminated by the flickering light of a gas lamp. My father-in-law was tied to a chair. His face was gaunt, but his eyes, though tired, still shone. Seeing him like that, tears flowed, and my trembling hands clung to the wall. At that moment, another figure entered. I held my breath. He was tall, wearing a black jacket, walking with the confidence of someone who knew he controlled the situation. His voice was deep and firm. "Alexander, if you cooperate, no one needs to suffer. Sign the land transfer papers, and you'll be free. Your son and daughter-in-law will also be saved." My father-in-law raised his head with eyes full of contempt. He smiled bitterly and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't even dream of it. Those lands belong to my ancestors. I'd rather die than sign that." The man in black laughed, a sound that echoed through the warehouse. "Excellent. Then wait. Once your daughter-in-law falls into my hands, we'll see if you stay so brave." Hearing that, I felt like a knife pierced my heart. His words confirmed everything. They were looking for me. I huddled trembling against the wall, while tears streamed down my cheeks. The old man placed his thin hand on my shoulder and squeezed gently. "Do you see?" he whispered. "He is the leader. His name is Marcus. He was your father-in-law's partner many years ago. After betraying him, he held a grudge. Until now." I clenched my fists so tight my nails dug into my skin. Marcus's name was etched in my mind as my mortal enemy. He was the one who brought my family to the brink, chained my father-in-law, endangered my husband, and made me a bargaining chip. When he left, silence enveloped the warehouse again. My father-in-law lowered his head and sighed. From afar, I saw his shoulders shaking. I knew it wasn't from fear, but from the worry he felt for Michael and me. The old man pulled me away, taking us out of the guard's sight. Once we were safe among the trees, he said in a low voice, "Now you understand why I asked you to calm down. Tonight, we met the enemy and saw how Alexander is. But to save him, we need help. Tomorrow, I will contact my friend in the police." I nodded, though my mind was a mess. And Michael? That night, they surrounded him. I don't know what happened to him. The old man sighed. "Trust me, he is still alive. If they caught him, they would have brought him here too. Everything revolves around those lands and your true identity. You are the most important piece they want to capture." Hearing him mention my identity, I felt another wave of confusion. After more than 20 years of living in ignorance, suddenly discovering I was the heir to valuable lands. And that was why some soulless people were chasing me. I felt anger, and at the same time, a huge responsibility on my shoulders. We returned to the shack when it was almost dawn. I lay on the mat, exhausted but wide-eyed. Marcus's words, my father-in-law's steady gaze, Michael's worried image. Everything replayed in my mind like a movie in slow motion. I knew there was no retreat. The old man sat beside me and said calmly, "Sophia, you need to prepare your mind. When I bring my friend, a confrontation is possible. In that moment, do not reveal your true identity. If they find out you are the heir to those lands, the situation will become more dangerous." I nodded and whispered, "I understand. I will keep the secret." But sir, if they continue to torture my father-in-law, do you think he can handle it? The old man's gaze darkened, but still shone with determination. Alexander is a strong man. He'd rather die than surrender. But we can't let him die. We need to get him out of there no matter what. His words were like a torch illuminating my heart. I clenched my hand, and a vow was born within me. I wouldn't let this family fall. Even if I had to sacrifice my life, I would find a way to bring back my father-in-law and my husband. The next morning, with the crowing of the rooster in the village, the old man took out an old cell phone and dialed a number. He spoke only a few words. "It's me. The time has come. Tonight at the river. Be ready." He hung up and looked at me with a serious face. "Tonight will be decisive. If we succeed, your family will be saved. If we fail, it might be the end for everyone. Do you still want to come?" I looked at him without hesitation. I raised my head and said with firmness, "I've come this far. I won't back down now. If I die, I want to die with my father and husband." The old man smiled slightly and nodded. "Good. I see in your eyes a great determination. Tonight, we will face them, and possibly you will see your husband again." Hearing that, I felt my heart burn. The longing for Michael accumulated over days mixed with an intense determination. I knew that night was the night of destiny, where all truths would be exposed, where life and death would be separated by a thin line. I clenched my hand and looked at the gray sky. "Dad, Michael, wait for me," I whispered. "Tonight, we will meet again, even in the midst of fire and blood." That night, the old man and I walked to the river. The moon hung in the sky like a silver, cold eye watching the rippling water. I followed the old man on the winding dirt path, my heart pounding. Every step on the wet grass was heavy, as if I were entering a battle not just for the lives of my father-in-law and Michael, but to face the truth of my own identity. In the distance, guards' flashlights swept around the abandoned warehouse. The chirping of crickets and the barking of dogs from the nearby village added an eerie tone to the atmosphere. The old man signaled me to stop and whispered, "My people are hidden in place. They will act on my signal. But remember, don't reveal your true identity under any circumstances, or everything will be ruined." I nodded, squeezing the hem of my dress with sweaty hands. Despite the cold night, my eyes were fixed on the warehouse door where I knew my father-in-law was a prisoner. "Dad, tonight I will get you out of here, even if it costs my life," I told myself. Suddenly, the rusty door opened with a creak. Marcus appeared, tall with a sharp gaze. Behind him, two of his men dragged a man with messy hair and torn clothes. I immediately recognized Michael. I almost screamed, but the old man quickly covered my mouth. "Hold it together. Don't give us away," he whispered. I felt my heart constrict, and tears flowed. He was alive, but they caught him. His face was full of bruises, but his eyes still shone with determination. They threw him on the floor right in front of his father. My father-in-law, exhausted, tried to lift his head. "Michael, son," he said in a hoarse voice. Michael smiled bitterly despite his split lip. "I'm okay, Dad. Don't worry." The scene almost made me faint. The two most important men in my life were in the enemy's hands. I wanted to run and hug them, but reason forced me to restrain myself. Marcus approached. His voice was sharp but authoritative. "How long will you continue this nonsense? Father and son, your daughter-in-law is free out there. I just need to give an order, and she will disappear without a trace. Sign, or your whole family dies." My father-in-law clenched his jaw with burning eyes. "Don't dream of it. I'd rather die than leave my ancestors' lands in the hands of a traitor like you." Marcus let out a cruel laugh that echoed through the cold warehouse. He leaned over my father-in-law and said, emphasizing every word, "Excellent. Then, wait. Once I bring your daughter-in-law to you, we'll see if your bravery remains." Hearing that, a shiver crawled through my body. I felt that, with the slightest mistake, they would drag me in as the final piece of their game. I tremblingly clenched my hand, and a voice of steel echoed inside me. No, I wouldn't let that happen. I needed to save my father and husband. At that moment, the old man gave a signal. From the bushes on the bank, several sturdy men emerged armed with metal pipes and flashlights. They were his old friends, former members of law enforcement, who still retained their honor and sense of justice. The clash began with a sharp whistle. Flashlights were immediately aimed at the guards. "You're surrounded. Drop your weapons," shouted a voice with authority. The frightened henchmen drew their knives. The warehouse became a chaos of shouts, crashes, and running. I saw Marcus grab Michael, putting a knife to his throat. "One more step, and I kill him," he roared. I screamed without thinking. "No, don't hurt him." My voice echoed in the night, and everything stopped. Marcus looked at me with a glint of victory. He smiled mockingly. Well, the obedient daughter-in-law. I knew you wouldn't hide for long." I was trembling, but in that moment a strange strength wrapped around me. I stepped out of the darkness and faced him. My voice was steady, though my body shook. "Marcus, if you want me, let them go." My father-in-law shouted in a broken voice. "Sophia, no. Go back." Michael, with red eyes, also shouted. "Sophia, don't be foolish." But I had already stepped forward. In that moment, I didn't feel like a helpless bride, but someone ready to face everything to protect her loved ones. Marcus laughed insanely. "So brave. But do you think you have value?" I looked him directly in the eyes. My lips trembled, but my voice was firm. "You're wrong. I am the heir to the lands by the interstate. The lands left to me by my real parents. If you want to complete your plan, you need me." Everything went silent. All eyes turned to me. My father-in-law was stunned, eyes wide, as if he only now understood something. Michael was stunned, his lips moving but no sound coming out. Marcus stared at me and then let out a manic laugh. "Ha, so fate is on my side because you confessed. Don't expect me to be merciful." I raised my head and, though tears streamed down my cheeks, said, "I want you to know I'd rather die than sign any paper. You will never get what you want." Marcus's face darkened. He pressed the knife to Michael's neck and growled, "Then I'll start with your husband. Let's see how long you last." The tension was unbearable. At that moment, police sirens echoed in the distance. Their blue and red lights flashed in the mist. The old man's contact arrived just in time. The henchman tried to flee in panic. Marcus, clenching his jaw, dragged Michael backward, but the circle was tightening. I ran toward them screaming, "Michael!" He looked at me with eyes full of love and determination, and suddenly, with all his strength, he broke free with an elbow strike. At that moment, someone from the circle charged at Marcus and knocked him down. There were shouts, the sound of handcuffs, chaos. I ran to hug my father-in-law, crying and shaking. "Dad, I'm here. I came." Alexander looked at me with teary eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "My daughter, you succeeded." That night, under the cold moonlight, the river became a battlefield. I knew the fight wasn't over, but at least my family had a chance to live. And from that moment, I wasn't the helpless bride running away, but a woman ready to face her destiny and fight until the end. The police sirens faded, leaving only the smell of gunpowder and the cold dampness of the night mist. Most of Marcus's men were arrested. Some were tied on the floor, others were begging, shivering. Marcus, defeated with hands cuffed behind his back, continued shouting curses. His helpless rage showed in venomous words. I remained kneeling on the cold floor, hugging my father-in-law. Alexander was so weak he could barely stand, but his eyes shone with an extraordinary light. When I whispered, Dad, I'm here," he looked at me for a long time, as if he finally understood something profound he had hidden until now. Michael approached, his face covered in blood and sweat, but determination still in his gaze. He helped us stand and asked in a trembling voice, "Sophia, why did you say that? You are the heir to the lands on the interstate?" I looked at my husband, tears flowing ceaselessly. I knew the time had come to face the truth. I took a deep breath and nodded. "Yes, Michael, I just found out too. My real parents owned those lands. They died in an accident, and I was sent away as a child. I didn't know my true identity until the old man told me everything." Michael was stunned. "So, that's why you lived in poverty, suffered all kinds of hardships without knowing you had a huge inheritance." "Sophia, I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you." I shook my head, squeezing his hand. "No, don't say that. The money and lands never mattered to me. All I needed was you and Dad, a home where I felt safe. But now that the truth is out, we can't turn our backs on it. I need to face it." My father-in-law coughed. His voice was weak but clear. "Sophia, I've known all of this for a long time." I froze, looking at him with wide eyes. "You knew, Dad?" He nodded slowly, with deep sadness in his gaze. "Your parents and I were friends. When they died, they entrusted the land titles to me. But I knew if it became known, you would never have peace. I decided to hide everything, wait for you to grow up, and have the strength to face it." Who would have thought fate wouldn't leave you be? Hearing that, a wave of emotion wrapped around me. Tears flowed even more, mixed with love for my father-in-law and pain for my own life. He had been protecting me silently all these years, carrying that massive secret. I sobbed, burying my face in his shoulder. Dad, I don't blame you for anything. I just feel huge pity for you. I would have preferred to carry it all, just so you were safe. Alexander, with a trembling hand, stroked my hair. My child, he said in a broken voice. From now on, I won't call you daughter-in-law. You are my daughter, like my own blood. His words touched me so deeply I couldn't answer. In that moment of danger in the middle of that wasteland, I heard the warmest words of my life. I knew the bond connecting me to this family was no longer just a marriage but something deeper, a bond of blood and unshakable trust. Michael hugged us. We'll get through this together, he said in a broken voice. Even if there are many enemies out there, as long as we are together, no one can separate us. But at that moment, Marcus's sour and mocking voice echoed. Don't think you've escaped, Sophia. Your identity is revealed. You will never have peace again. There are others out there, and you are the target everyone wants. Police took him away, but his insane laugh continued to echo. You think saving them is the end? Your nightmare is just beginning. A shiver crawled through my body. His words were like a curse hanging over my head, a premonition that the trials awaiting me would be even harder. But when I looked at Michael and my father-in-law, I saw their eyes full of faith and love, and it gave me strength. After the clash, the police took my father-in-law and Michael to the nearest health center. I sat beside them, wiping the blood from Michael's forehead while tears continued to flow. Michael squeezed my hand and smiled weakly. Sophia, I know you suffered greatly, but I promise you, from now on, whoever you are, whatever your identity, I will stay by your side to protect you. Until the end, I nodded, leaning on his shoulder, feeling a mix of happiness and anxiety. I knew we weren't just facing Marcus's remaining men, but a battle for my parents' lands. The fight was just starting, and I, from being a helpless bride, had become the one who must confront it. My father-in-law looked at us with a mix of warmth and worry. Children, get ready. What happened tonight is just the start. Now that the truth is out, more storms will come. But I trust if the family stays together, no force can bring us down. I held my father-in-law's and Michael's hands, joining all three. In that moment, I felt the strength of the family bond, the power of married love, a strength no darkness could destroy. Outside, the mist faded, and the first rays of dawn illuminated the river. I looked at the brightening sky and whispered, Dad, Mom, I know the truth now. I won't let your legacy fall into the wrong hands. I will live and live with dignity. But I also understood that although the sun was rising, the darkness hadn't fully disappeared. The road ahead was full of storms, and Marcus's words continued to echo in my mind like a premonition of new disasters. After the chaotic night at the river, I thought my family had finally escaped danger. My father-in-law was safe, Michael was free, and Marcus's group was in police custody. But his last words, your nightmare, is just beginning, echoed in my mind like a ghost preventing me from finding peace. In the following days, we returned home and tried to continue our lives. But the atmosphere wasn't the same. Alexander remained in bed, his body thin from days of captivity. Every time I saw him, I remembered his words with emotion. You are no longer a daughter-in-law. You are my daughter. It lit up my heart, but also placed a new burden on my shoulders. Michael, after treating his wounds, paced the house endlessly with a permanently dark look. I knew he worried not just about his father's health but about me. He often held my hand tight and said with determination, Sophia, whatever happens, trust me. I won't let anyone hurt you again. I nodded with a lump in my throat, but I knew that promise wouldn't be easy to keep. Since learning the truth about my identity, I had become the target of many covetous eyes. One afternoon while I was cooking, Matthew entered quietly with a tense face. He sat down and said in a low voice, Sophia, I heard something. It's not just Marcus chasing the lands. Behind him, there is a much bigger person. I looked up abruptly, my heart pounding. Who? Matthew. He lowered his voice with a serious look. An important businessman in the region. They say he has much influence, money, and power. He is the one who really wants to claim your lands and your parents' lands. Marcus was just a pawn. I froze. It turned out everything we went through was just the beginning. Behind everything, A more powerful hand was running things. "And what do we do?" I whispered, trembling. Matthew looked at me and said in a low voice, "There is only one way. Face him. But before that, you and Michael need to protect the property titles. That is their main target. If those fall into their hands, everything is lost." Hearing that, I remembered my father-in-law's words. The papers were with him. At first, I didn't pay attention, but now I understood they were the key to everything. That night, I sat by my father-in-law's bed and asked in a low voice, "Dad, do you still have the property titles for my parents' lands?" My father-in-law was silent for a long time, looking distant in his memories. Finally, he nodded. "Yes. I hid them in a secret place even Michael doesn't know. But Sophia, if you take them, they will keep chasing you. If you surrender them, you lose everything your parents left. What will you choose?" Tears flowed onto the pillow. I lowered my head with a broken voice. "Dad, the land doesn't matter to me. I just want the family to live in peace. But if I surrender it, it's like betraying my parents. I'd rather carry this." Alexander looked at me, his eyes shining with a mix of pride and pain. "You have changed a lot, Sophia. All right, once I recover, I will take you to get them." The following days I lived in constant anxiety. In town, rumors started spreading that our family owned extremely valuable lands and that I, the new bride, was the true heir. Glances of curiosity, envy, and even contempt surrounded me, suffocating me. I knew the news had spread, and the person behind it all knew. One night after Michael and I finished dinner, there was a knock at the door. I was startled, heart pounding. Michael opened it and saw a middle-aged man, elegantly dressed with a cold gaze. He smiled slightly and said in a smooth but intentional voice, "I am Mr. Sterling. I believe you've heard of me. I am here to offer a deal." I froze. It was in the man Matthew spoke of, the true mastermind. He entered with an aura of power. He looked at me, and a smile traced his lips. "Miss Sophia, the heir to her parents' lands. I am here to give you the best offer. Give me all the properties, in exchange for a large sum, and, most importantly, peace for your family." Michael squeezed my hand under the table. "Mr. Sterling," he said in a tense voice, "we don't need money. We just want to live in peace. Please, don't force us anymore." The man let out a small laugh, eyes shining with coldness. "Do you think I'm asking for your opinion? I am giving you a chance. If you are reasonable, you will live quietly. If you are stubborn like old man Alexander, I'm afraid things won't be so easy." He stood up, adjusted his jacket, and his gaze pierced me like a knife. "I'll give you 3 days. Afterward, don't say I didn't warn you." The door closed with a dry thud, like a period on our brief peace. I slumped in the chair, shaking. Michael hugged me. "Sophia, don't be afraid. I won't let him do anything to you." But I knew a new storm was coming. Marcus was just the start. This man, Sterling, was the real danger. He didn't use knives or bats, but power, money, and unpredictable tactics. That night, alone by the lamplight, I was overwhelmed with anxiety. I knew the next 3 days would mark a new before and after in my life. On one hand, a fake peace in exchange for surrender. On the other, an intense battle to protect my dignity and my parents' legacy. I placed my hand on my chest and whispered, "Dad, Mom, what should I do? I won't surrender. Even if I have to face a wolf, I will fight to the end." And in the silence of the night, I saw it clearly. The real battle for my family and me was just beginning. The 3 days passed in suffocating tension. I lived in a state of constant alert. Any noise at the gate made me jump. My father-in-law, Alexander, remained in bed, but his face was always serious and thoughtful. Michael paced with red eyes from lack of sleep. The whole house seemed suspended on a thin thread about to snap. As promised, on the afternoon of the 3rd day, Mr. Sterling appeared. No chaos or threats. He arrived in an expensive car parked in front of the gate, followed by several decent-looking men with sharp gazes. He entered the house with a mocking smile plastered on his face, as if he already knew he would win. He sat down, calmly lit a cigarette, and the blue smoke floating in the air made the atmosphere heavier. He looked at me and asked indifferently, "Miss Sophia, 3 days have passed. What is your answer?" Sitting beside Michael, I squeezed his hand to stay calm. I took a deep breath and looked him directly in the eyes. "I have thought carefully, but I cannot give you my parents' lands. That is their legacy. It is my responsibility to protect them." A thick silence prevailed. Sterling's gaze darkened, and his smile vanished. He put out the cigarette with a dry tap in the ashtray and said in a hard voice, "You should remember that no one opposes me without getting hurt. Don't make old man Alexander's mistake." My father-in-law, leaning on a cane, emerged from his room. Though his body was weak, his gaze was sharp. He looked at Sterling and said in a hoarse but clear voice, "Sterling, your greed has blinded you. These lands are not for sale, especially to fall into the hands of someone unprincipled. Neither your power nor money will allow you to steal them." Mr. Sterling smirked and turned to me. "Do you see? Because of that stubbornness, Alexander almost died. I don't want you to end up like him. You're young, married, have a future. Isn't it worth trading some land for peace?" I trembled, but I remembered everything we went through. My escape on our wedding night, the kidnapping of my father-in-law, Michael almost dying. If I retreated now, all that sacrifice would be wasted. I bit my lip and said firmly, "Mr. Sterling, I'd rather die than live with shame. Do what you must. I will not surrender." My voice echoed in the house, silencing everyone. Michael squeezed my hand, eyes shining with pride. My father-in-law nodded slightly with trembling lips, but an expression of satisfaction. Mr. Sterling looked at us for a long time and suddenly let out a mocking laugh. "Good. You are brave. Let's see how long that lasts." At that moment, police sirens echoed outside, and blue and red lights flashed. The door burst open, and several agents entered. Leading them was the old man's friend from the shack. "Mr. Sterling," he said in a firm voice, "we have enough evidence of your conspiracy with Marcus's group for illegal land acquisition. You are under arrest." The world seemed to stop. Sterling froze. The color of his face changed, but he regained his composure. He immediately put out the cigarette, stood up slowly, and said, "Arrest me. Go ahead. But you won't stop me." As they took him, he turned and looked at me with a coldness that raised goosebumps. "Sophia, this game isn't over. We'll see." They took him away, leaving a heavy atmosphere. I slumped in the chair, trembling from head to toe. Everything happened so fast, like a storm passing through. Michael hugged me. "Sophia, you were amazing," he whispered. "You stood your ground. You didn't give up. I'm proud of you." I hugged him, crying, while my father-in-law approached and placed a hand on our shoulders. "Children," he said warmly, "all storms pass. What matters is we didn't lose our dignity. Our ancestors, wherever they are surely smiling." In the following days, the police investigation continued. Mr. Sterling was jailed, and other hidden forces were exposed. Our family found temporary peace, but I knew life wasn't always a bed of roses. Maybe tomorrow we would face a new challenge. However, after everything, I wasn't the helpless bride I used to be. I learned to rise, protect what was mine, and value my family more than ever. One morning, with sunlight flooding the yard, my father-in-law sat on the veranda and told me with a distant look, "Sophia, remember that lands are material things. What matters most are people, integrity. You can have everything, but if you lose your dignity, you have nothing left." I sat beside him, held his thin hand, and nodded. "I understand, Dad. I will live in a way that honors my parents' legacy and the love you gave me." Michael came out of the house, sat beside me, and put his arm around me. He smiled with eyes full of love. Our family went through a storm. Now is the time to start again. I trust as long as we are together, nothing can bring us down. I leaned on his shoulder, looking at the blue sky. The pain and fear vanished, making way for peace and a new faith. I knew life continues, but with love and unity, my family would overcome it. And I also knew that from now on, my steps were no longer the steps of a scared bride on her wedding night, but the steps of a strong woman who learned to live, love, and protect the most sacred things. The story you heard has ended, but its echo will surely remain. A young bride on the night that should have been the start of her happiness was swept into a tornado of danger. Without the sacrifice and courage of her father-in-law, without the unconditional love of her husband, Sophia likely wouldn't have survived that storm. In her journey, we witnessed the power of family bonds and courage. A seemingly weak woman dared to finally face her enemies, protect her family, and defend her parents' legacy with an unmatched heart. Sophia ceased to be the trembling bride fleeing in the dark, to become a woman who stands firm, loves, and fights for what is right. This story also reminds us that although greed and betrayal can lead people down the path of evil, justice will always prevail. Characters like Marcus and Sterling may sow chaos and pain, but in the end, They must answer to the law and their own conscience. Furthermore, it makes us think about the value of home, money, lands, power, all become meaningless if the love of family is lost. In moments of trial, only the hand of a loved one can comfort the heart. Only family unity can help us overcome storms. In our daily lives, we all face challenges and difficult decisions. We hope this story inspires you to believe that, as long as we maintain our integrity and live with love and honor, the light will always find a way to penetrate the darkness. Thank you for joining us in this narrative. If it touched you and made you think, we invite you to follow our content to keep sharing stories that enrich us as human beings.